Hey everyone! I realise it's been a while, but it goes to show that lockdown brings back some old hobbies. And so here I've got another mock review for you today. This one's going to be slightly different just because I'm going to talk about tensegrity structures in general. So after talking about these for a while, it will just be a discussion about structures in the world today. So let's put these guys aside for a second. My latest creation is this Simplex Tensegrity, which is the simplest tensegrity model. Now, what exactly is a tensegrity structure? It's composed of tension and compression members, such that the compression members do not touch. So the compression members in this case are these struts, and the tension members are these chains, noting that the chains can't take any compression because they'll just go slack. And even though in this case the compression members, they can take some tension, they don't have to. And I am fascinated with tensegrity structures. I love them. They have really, really cool properties, and they're incredibly lightweight for their stiffness. So by stiffness I mean how hard is it to make it deflect. So in this case, if I try and nudge this node to the side, then the tensions in the chains will increase and then bring it back to what it was. So it's actually very stable. And it can actually support a decent amount of weight as well. If I just put this book on top, you'll see that it deflects a little bit. The forces change in the every member, and these chains are still taut. And notably, because this system, there is no redundancy in this system, which means that if I remove any one connection, then the whole thing will fall apart. So you can see it's very stable here, but if I take this one off, the whole thing collapses. So let's put that back. Cool. So this is not the first time that I've made a tensegrity structure. Here's one that I made a couple of years ago. Now, in some ways, this isn't exactly a tensegrity structure because the strings are allowed to pass through the holes, and so it doesn't necessarily start at one and end at the other. But this one is a slightly different one with an extra degree of redundancy. So you could actually cut a string and then the structure would still have some shape to it. It wouldn't collapse into a single plane. Now, there are some things which aren't strictly tensegrity structures. The thing is, there was a little trend a while ago, and if you Google Lego tensegrity, you'll get something like this. So just to have a look at it, it looks a little bit like an S shape perhaps, where you've got two separate L-shaped, well, I'm going to call them compression members, and they're held by these chains. And people call this a tensegrity structure. I disagree. It's not a pure tensegrity structure. Now, why do I say that? It's not a pure tensegrity structure because it is reliant on external forces to make it stable. What are the external forces? Gravity. So if we just talk about forces briefly, so let's look at this top L-shaped member here. Obviously it's got its own weight that's going downwards, and all of that is taken in this chain there, which is in tension. And additionally, this top member wants to fall that way because its center of mass is over on this end somewhere. And to resist that falling, you've got these two supporting chains here. So in theory, if this top member were perfectly balanced, like if you imagine if it were just a ball there, or maybe if it was a vertical stick where the center of mass is directly above here, then you don't actually need these chains. Like, these are just there to stop it from swaying side to side. Well, to stop it from going too far side to side. And so, from a structural engineering point of view, this structure is, well, it's stable in the sense that if you give it a nudge, it will go back to its original position. But that is only a local stability. Like, I can do this, which is, clearly bad for a structure. And that was one thing which you could not do with the true tensegrity, simplex tensegrity that I showed you just now. So this is reliant on gravity to make it work. And yes, that's why I'm not a big fan of these designs. or at least they shouldn't call themselves tensegrity models. Like, they're cool. They use tensegrity-like concepts, I guess. But in my opinion, it's not much more spectacular than, you know, just hanging something from a string. So, anyway, I'm still, you know, I guess I like having this around, but I'm just not going to call this a tensegrity model. Sweet. So, anyway, that's mostly what I was going to talk about with these LEGO models in particular. Now, I just wanted to talk about the concept of tensegrity and how it differs from regular structures. Because you might be thinking, oh, wow, these look really cool. But are they actually useful for anything besides just looking nice? And in fact, you get loads of sculptures which are tensegrity models, and they look amazing, but you could argue they're not particularly functional. Well, first of all, let's talk about the difficulties of tensegrity structures. Firstly, their geometry is quite complicated. Like, there are no right angles here, so if, let's say, you wanted to make a building or something, it would be quite impractical for the geometry to do all of that. And also, it's a lot easier to build something that lifts things through compression rather than tension. What do I mean by compression? Well, let's take a typical structure. Here's my phone stand, and this is how, well, many structures work. This is like the tripod that my camera is sitting on. You put a weight on top, and so that weight goes down, compress, and just disperses into the ground. And ultimately, it's the ground that, you know, resists that. Which is not the case in a tensegrity structure, because if you press it down, then that actually increases some of the tensions in some of the chains, because it's making the structure deform and it has to resist all of that. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that tensegrity structures are useless. There is a video by NASA. If you look up NASA Super Ball Bot, you get something that's really, really cool that uses a lot of the properties of tensegrity structures. Now, they're incredibly lightweight, so if NASA wants to send something to space, obviously weight is a huge factor. But there's not much material here, even though it takes up a lot of space, and it is very stable, because if I push it down, it will just pop right back up. And that in itself is really cool. The Super Ball Bot has struts that can extend and compress, and that can effectively make it roll around. And let's say you want to suspend a payload, like your central computer or something, put that in the middle, and then drop it onto Mars, and it lands, and everything is relatively undamaged. And so it's a very niche use of tensegrity structures, but nevertheless, I think they're incredibly cool. Though, of course, for my sake, it just looks nice on a shelf, and I hope you agree. If you want to build this yourself, it is incredibly easy to do so. You can probably tell just by looking at it. I believe it is just 21 pieces. You need 9 of these chains, and then these struts at a particular length. Notice that the length of each chain is actually, you can fine tune it to make whatever shape you like, really, in terms of like how steep the beams are, and then, you know, make sure it looks nice if you look at it from this angle. So anyway, that's mostly what I wanted to talk about in this video. So thanks for watching. Take care.